3. The lesson of fire and steel. The Zelenar had always seen war as a cold, calculated process, a matter of overwhelming firepower, strategic positioning, and breaking enemy morale through sheer force. They had done it to dozens of civilizations, reducing proud species to servitude under their empire. But humanity did not play by their rules. The first time the Zelenar truly understood what they were facing was after the siege of Terrasfor. It was supposed to have been a decisive blow, an orbital bombardment that would shatter a major human colony, forcing Earth into submission. Instead, it became the moment that humanity turned the war into something far worse than a simple military conflict. It became a message: the burning of Terrasfor. Terrasfor had been a thriving human world, lush, full of life, home to nearly 10 million people. The Zelenar had no interest in its beauty, only its strategic location. The Empire's commanders believed that a swift, overwhelming assault would crush resistance before it even began. And so, the sky burned. Thousands of plasma bombs rained down from Zelenar warships, reducing entire cities to molten wastelands. The bombardment lasted 6 days. By the time the last Zelenar cruiser left orbit, there was nothing but ruin left behind. The Zelenar celebrated their victory. They believed the war was won. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Operation Revenant. 2 weeks after Terrasfor's destruction, the Zelenar received their first warning. The Empire's communications network was hacked not by military specialists, not by spies, but by human civilians. The broadcast was simple, yet chilling. The screen flickered, and a voice spoke in fluent Zelenar. "You took our home. You killed our families. Now we take everything from you." The Zelenar commanders dismissed it as empty rhetoric, until the first disappearance. A Zelenar supply station near the warfront went dark overnight. No distress calls, no warning, just silence. When a patrol ship arrived to investigate, they found nothing but wreckage. Not a single body. No survivors. Then it happened again. An entire battleship, Zerath Kul, was taken in the middle of a hyperspace jump. The Zelenar barely managed to recover its logs, but what they found made no sense. They came from nowhere. No alarms. No explosions. Just shadows in the corridors. Transmission lost. The Zelenar tried to keep the disappearances a secret, but fear began to spread. Their warriors were trained to face death in battle, but this was something else. This was terror. The bloodied sands of Arkal Outpost. As the Zelenar scrambled to understand what was happening, the humans escalated. They struck a major supply line, targeting Arkal Outpost, a key refueling station for the Empire's fleet. The outpost was lightly guarded. Far from the front lines, no one had expected an attack. And yet, the humans came. Not in a fleet, not in an armada, but in small, specialized team stealth dropships that slipped past the station's sensors, deploying soldiers directly onto the surface. What followed was not conventional warfare. The first sign of trouble was the power failure. The entire outpost plunged into darkness, its defenses offline. Then the communications array went silent. By the time the Zelenar reinforcements arrived, they found only one survivor, a lone officer, his mind shattered by what he had witnessed. His report was fragmented, but one phrase stood out. They came in the dark. They took them. They took their bodies. The Zelenar didn't understand at first. Then they reviewed the security footage. The humans hadn't just killed the Zelenar station there. They had taken the corpses. Every single one. Why? It wasn't until weeks later that the Zelenar received their answer. The psychological war begins. The Zelenar homeworld was far from the front lines, untouched by the conflict. But one night, an unknown transmission broke through their secure channels, hijacking the Empire's largest broadcast network. A new image appeared on every screen across the planet. A Zelenar officer, one of their own, tied to a chair in a darkened room. His breathing was erratic, his mandibles twitching in fear. Behind him, A human soldier stood in shadow, voice calm and steady. "We know you see us as animals. We know you thought this would be easy. But now you will know fear." The human stepped forward, holding a Zelenar skull in his gloved hand. "You took our dead and left them to rot. So we took yours, and we studied them." The soldier tilted his head. "Did you know your species has over 78 unique pressure points? We do now." The Zelenar population froze in collective horror. The transmission cut out before the fate of the captured officer could be seen, but the message was clear. Humanity had learned their weaknesses, and they were not afraid to use them. The turning of the war. The Zelenar warlords convened in emergency meetings. Their armies were more powerful. Their fleets were larger. Their technology was more advanced. But they were losing. The humans had turned the war into something beyond strategy or numbers. They waged it on every front: military, psychological, technological. They no longer fought for survival. They fought for vengeance. Entire Zelenar fleets began defecting. Soldiers who had once been loyal to the Empire now questioned whether victory was even possible. Some surrendered. Others simply disappeared, deserting before the humans could come for them. The Zelenar's greatest weapon had always been fear. But now, the humans had taken that weapon and turned it against them. And there was nothing more terrifying than an enemy who had learned how to break you. The Empire's final choice. Warlord Vactyl watched the reports come in, mandibles twitching in frustration. His empire had never known fear. But now, it was consumed by it. They had underestimated the humans. And now, for the first time in centuries, the Zelenar were forced to consider the unthinkable. Peace. Not because they wanted it, but because the alternative was extinction. For the end of arrogance. The fall of the Zelenar warlords. Warlord Vactyl had always believed in the absolute supremacy of the Zelar Empire. From the moment he had ascended to the War Council, he had known that his people were destined to rule the stars. And why wouldn't they? They had conquered dozens of civilizations, crushed opposition with ruthless efficiency, and expanded their dominion for centuries without challenge. But now, as he stood before the Imperial War Council, surrounded by trembling warlords, he understood something that chilled him to his very core. They were losing, not in a traditional sense, not through raw numbers or firepower. Their fleets were still vast, their armies still mighty, but their spirit was broken. Vactyl could see it in the eyes of his fellow warlords, the way their mandibles twitched in barely restrained panic. The once invincible Zelenar were on the brink of collapse, and humanity had done it without conquering a single world. They had shattered supply lines, turned their own people against them, and transformed fear into a weapon sharper than any blade. What had once been a war for dominance had become something much darker, a reckoning. The last stand at Verith Prime. With Zelenar forces scattered and morale disintegrating, the Empire's leaders attempted one last act of defiance. They would make their stand on Verith Prime, one of their most fortified worlds, a military stronghold with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. A message was broadcast across the Empire. Let the humans come. Let them crash against our walls like waves upon stone. They will learn that the Zelenar do not kneel. It was meant to inspire. Instead, it became their final mistake. The arrival of the human fleet. When the Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace, the Zelenar were expecting overwhelming numbers. They expected battleships. They expected brute force. But instead, the humans arrived with precision. Instead of engaging the orbital defenses head-on, they launched a coordinated infiltration operation, striking key installations across Verith Prime with surgical efficiency. Planetary shields flickered and collapsed. Defensive batteries were hacked and turned against their own fleets. Human shock troopers landed on the surface within hours, not days. The Zelenar, who had expected a long, drawn-out siege, were completely unprepared. The breaking of the High Command. In the heart of Verith Prime's war citadel, the remaining Zelenar warlords huddled together in desperation. Reports came in by the minute, each more horrifying than the last. Entire battalions vanished overnight. Communications were hijacked, spreading misinformation that sent their forces into chaos. And the worst part, the humans were taking prisoners, not for ransom, not for negotiation, but to make them watch. The Zelenar High Command received a transmission from one of their own captured generals, a grizzled warrior named Velkaroth. His image flickered on their monitors, seated in a cold, dimly lit room. His mandibles twitched as he struggled to remain composed. Behind him stood a human officer, calm, methodical, and in complete control. Velkaroth, the war is over. We must. The human placed a hand on his shoulder, silencing him with a simple gesture. Then he spoke directly to the remaining Zelenar leaders. Terran Commander, you never understood us. You thought you were teaching us a lesson, but we were the ones who were learning. And now you reap what you have sown. Velkaroth's breathing grew heavier. Terran Commander, surrender, or watch your empire burn. The transmission cut out. For a long moment, silence filled the war room. And then, the first warlord spoke the words that no Zelenar had ever dared to utter before. We must surrender. The last days of the Empire. The fall of Verith Prime was not the end of the Zelenar, but it was the end of their arrogance. Humanity did not wipe them out. They did not exterminate them. But they did something far worse. They broke them. With every shattered fleet, with every abandoned world, with every captured officer forced to confess their failures, the Zelenar's legend of dominance crumbled. Their former vassal species began to rise up, emboldened by humanity's defiance. Planets rebelled. Colonies refused to pay tribute. The Empire, once unshakable, fractured from within. And the humans, they did not claim territory. They did not demand tribute. They simply left the Empire to rot, a decaying relic of its former self. A lesson to the galaxy. A warning. The final conversation. Warlord Vaktal sat in his private quarters, the weight of his people's failure pressing down on him. Then his terminal chimed. A secured Terran transmission. For a long moment, he considered ignoring it. But he knew. He had to answer. The screen flickered to life, revealing a human officer. Not gloating. Not mocking. Just watching. Terran Commander, the war is over. We could have destroyed you. Vaktal remained silent. Terran Commander, but we didn't. Not because we couldn't, but because we wanted you to remember. The human leaned forward. Terran Commander, we are not conquerors. We are not tyrants. But if you ever come for us again, his eyes were cold. Terran Commander, we will teach you another lesson. And next time, we won't let you recover. The transmission cut out. Vaktal stared at the screen for a long time. And for the first time in his life, he understood the true meaning of defeat. Not just the loss of battles, not just the loss of territory, but the loss of the right to call themselves superior. Humanity had not merely won the war. They had destroyed the myth of Zelenar supremacy. And nothing, not time, not power, not history could ever undo that. The end of an era. The Zelenar Empire, once feared across the stars, was no more. And in its place, a galaxy that would never underestimate humanity again. 5. A new dawn. The ashes of an empire. The Zelenar Empire did not fall in a single moment. It unraveled piece by piece. After their surrender at Verith Prime, their vast dominion began to fracture. Planets that had once cowered under their rule rose in defiance. Vassal species, long subjected to brutal oppression, turned against their former masters. Entire fleets, once the pride of the Empire, vanished, some defecting, others destroyed in battles of rebellion. The Zelenar, for all their strength, had never truly understood the foundation of power. It was not built on weapons, not on fleets, but on fear. And now, that fear was gone. The fate of the Zelenar, Some of the remaining warlords tried to fight back to reclaim their lost territories, to remind the galaxy of their former might. But they had lost more than just battles. They had lost their myth of invincibility, and humanity made sure the galaxy never forgot. Terran forces released every captured Zelenar officer back to their own people, not as warriors, but as broken relics of a shattered empire. "Look at them," the humans whispered to the galaxy. "This is what they became when we stopped fearing them." Some Zelenar attempted to flee into exile, seeking sanctuary in distant systems. Others, those who had ruled through cruelty and arrogance, were hunted down by their own former slaves. But the greatest punishment was not exile. It was irrelevance. The Zelenar were no longer feared. They were no longer gods of war. They were a warning, a reminder of what happened to those who underestimated humanity. The new galactic order. With the Empire's collapse, the galactic balance shifted. For centuries, the Zelenar had been the dominant force, ruling through fear and destruction. Their fall left a void, one that countless species scrambled to fill. Some expected humanity to seize the opportunity to become the new conquerors, taking what was left of the Empire and ruling it for themselves. But the humans had no interest in ruling. They had fought not for conquest, but for survival. Instead of claiming territory, they rebuilt. They sent relief ships to the worlds the Zelenar had devastated. They helped former vassal species establish their own governments. They dismantled Zelenar war factories, replacing them with centers of science and industry. And in doing so, they earned something far more valuable than fear. They earned respect, a meeting of worlds. A year after the war's end, a summit was held on New Geneva, a human world that had become the center of diplomacy in the post-war era. Representatives from across the galaxy attended, some old enemies, some new allies, all gathered to decide the future. Among them was Warlord Vactyl, one of the last surviving Zelenar leaders. He was no longer a ruler, no longer a conqueror, just a diplomat, representing a people that no longer held power. When he entered the council chamber, he expected gloating. He expected humanity to revel in their victory. Instead, they offered him a seat, not as a prisoner, but as an equal. The final conversation. After the summit, Warlord Vactyl found himself standing beside a human diplomat, an aging woman named Admiral Rebecca Hale, one of the architects of humanity's war strategy. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Vactyl finally broke the silence. "Vactyl, you could have destroyed us." Admiral Hale nodded. "Hale!" "Yes." The Zelenar's mandibles twitched. He had expected diplomacy. He had expected long-winded speeches about peace and unity. But humanity had never been ones for empty words. "Vactyl, why didn't you?" Hale turned to face him, her gaze calm but unyielding. "Hale, because that would have made us like you." The word struck harder than any weapon. For centuries, the Zelenar had believed strength was everything, that mercy was weakness, that fear was power. But humanity had won without becoming monsters. And that, more than anything, was what shattered the last remnants of Zelenar arrogance. "Vactyl, what happens now?" Hale glanced at the stars. "Hale, we build something better. A new dawn." The war had ended, but its lessons remained. The galaxy had learned the truth about humanity, not just their ferocity, but their resolve. They were not conquerors. They were defenders. They fought, not for power, but for a future where no one had to live in fear. And because of that, the galaxy had changed forever. The Zelenar were no longer the masters of the stars. The balance of power had shifted, and at the heart of it all stood humanity, not as rulers, but as guardians of a new age. A new dawn had arrived, and this time, the future would be written by those who refused to bow.